Hello, sunshine. It's Timmy here from heartablazepodcast. My energy level is probably a bit low because I'm kind of still recovering, and you might notice I missed an episode. I decided to give myself a little bit of time because, as the episode title suggests, something just wasn't really quite right. And it's not that I don't love the podcast anymore or anything like that. It was actually a lot of different things, which I wrote down some notes for. And I thought I could share with you and go through the list one by one. And I think this episode would be a really good reminder for a lot of different people, especially if you're starting something new or you're in the hustle, or maybe you've just kind of gotten used to a routine, or if you're really hard on yourself, if you lack confidence. We're going to cover a lot of those stuff. First off, the statistics. It was very, very good that I had the talk with my friend Brezie, who's a producer from Sydney, very early on when I was talking about my statistics being really good for the channel in July. And it was kind of like a huge surge. But I think I also forget that this whole year has been a huge surge for my YouTube, which is way beyond my expectations. And also, obviously, the fact that Sam Tompkins even subscribed to the channel. And Breezy very early on suggested to me, he was saying like, congrats, and don't worry too much about the numbers. Just know that when you're starting off, because he is been in the industry a lot longer than I have in terms of at least content creation parts of things, because I don't have any musical experiences and stuff, telling me that numbers will change quite drastically and such. So just know that it doesn't always have anything to do with the channel. You can just keep on doing what you're doing, all that kind of stuff. Good reminders. And I think it does still affect you, and it's easier said than done when you know it in one side of your logical side of your head, but you continue to, I guess, you still can't really control the other side, the feeling kind of side of things. And for this month, let's talk numbers. For example, it went from like plus 40, plus 50% kind of like view increases per month. So, we're not dropping, but we're just dropping the increase. Like the increase hasn't been as high, but it's still been staying above plus green standards for views and such. Subscribers dropped quite a lot though, like in terms of, I should stop saying that, dropped. Subscriber increase has dropped a lot. So like we're talking from plus 21 like subscribers last month to plus 3 or 4 at the most this month. And then as more time progresses for the month, it kind of keeps changing it, and it's now just saying plus 1. So like every time I kind of check it, it makes it a little less exciting and a little bit more sort of like, and the reason why it matters so much is this month, I've been feeling pretty like a lot less confident as well. And I think you would notice as well in the last while, I've been very, very busy with events, and it's good because like, I love experiencing new things and I love being busy and going around doing stuff. It keeps me going. You will notice sometimes like I ramble on a lot and kind of like speed run my words. That's just something I often do, but it is often more like when I'm kind of on the go kind of energy, then catching up with friends, that energy continues to surge. Then I get excited, then energy surges even more, and then I'll kind of like even more machine gun, like updating things. And I don't like that so much because I know a lot of friends don't necessarily enjoy that because they don't get a word in sometimes, and they have to wait for a while to kind of do that. And then sometimes they also, then kind of don't catch as much of what I'm saying because I then sometimes don't enunciate as well. And I'm like shooting the words out, and I don't really think about my words as well. Like my sentence construction is one thing that I'm always really not confident about. And if you have ADHD or something along that line, that probably relates to this. I think this is kind of a trait of that. And we kind of shoot out our words as we construct a sentence rather than construct a sentence, think it out and then say it out loud. Which often leads to kind of like sentences going in a big paragraph when it could have been like 2 sentences. And yeah, so I think like the thing is when you're at an event and you're constructing like an interview, or like, bouncing around the interview questions, kind of trying to make a flow, all that kind of stuff, it is quite different in feeling and structure to having a update, or I guess what I like to call ramble episodes. And I guess that's probably not a good name for it, because a lot of it is good things, like, that's why you follow a channel, because you like the person that's hosting it and the stuff that they're doing and their concept. And me talking about stuff that I think about that are important, or like things in my life that you can relate to. And I think that's a very important part of a channel like myself, which is called HeartablazE, where it's very focused on the heart, the connection, the feelings. And I think I forget that and let the lack of confidence, or like the moment of lows, take over, giving myself like a low blow for no reason. And I think going to so many events have been good, but like in the amount of like a rush and busyness, I have become less confident about rambling episodes, because I'm worried that I'm just going to not have a lot to say. Or I worry when I don't have a lot to say, I try to ramble and, stretch it a little bit. Like in the archery episode and the episode before that, both episodes I felt like, or maybe the episode after that actually, both episodes I felt like I stretched it a tiny bit. Like maybe it was a 10-minute video, but then maybe it probably would have only been a 10-minute video and I made it 15 minutes because I was trying to like make it extend and hit like a minimal time. Whereas like slightly earlier on, I would have been totally fine with 10-minute videos being a 10-minute video, 30-minute videos being a 30-minute videos, 1-hour videos being a 1-hour video. Each one has a very specific context and values, and that's what the channel's diversity is for. So I should not dwell on that. And it's a good reminder. It's good that I've noticed it so early on with such early numbers, so more people get to experience a better quality production, I guess. And yeah, I think all things, this will be a growing opportunity, maturing myself as a person and as a content creator. And I think this all-time low has happened for a little bit, but this is the first time when it's kind of really crashed down on me. And I think it started off was like when I was kind of speaking to someone, and I haven't, mind you, like dated someone in, I think, over 2 years now, since my last major date where I really, really crushed hard on someone and we matched so well. And things went really close. And the thing that makes it hardest for me is when someone's almost like a situationship, but like in like further along than that, where kind of like, you even hold hands, kiss, and kind of, not just hook up and stuff like till very, very later. And everything else like happens very organically. And you feel like on values and stuff, you connect. And this was a person that was very, very close to becoming pretty much like boyfriend status. And then kind of then just changed his mind and blocked me out of nowhere. And then later on told me that because a friend said, blah, blah, like, oh, I don't think he's right for you or something like that. And I'm just like, well, I'd rather you not decide that on your own and at least give me a heads up about it. But he was young, and at the time, and this is why I don't date really young people anymore. Ideally, try not to, because generally it does fit into it's not really a stereotyping thing, but it's generally not many people at 18 or something, or 20. He wasn't 18, he was 20, but like anyone at around like 20s with a 10-year age gap between us, like not many people in 20s would know exactly where they're going yet or want to settle down yet, because you haven't done your traveling, you haven't experienced as much of life yet, you haven't experienced enough or had enough happen yet to kind of fully flesh out what life is about and what your life is about. And that's particularly true for me. In my early 20s, I dated a lot of people, but at the time, I really didn't understand what love was, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And I find, yes, it's a true argument that you don't have to be fully ready to be in a relationship. You don't have to be fully healed to be in a relationship, but all that is very, very contextual advice, I would say, if you're looking for advice. Like, take it all with a grain of salt, because it applies differently to each person. For example, a person with a trauma of a certain type may work really well with like a person when they love a different kind of trauma that leads to you abusing or being domestic violent to domestically violent to your partner, that would not work with another partner. That's something you need to get your shit sorted yourself. And I'm saying this point because I'm relating to myself in the sense that not domestic violence, by the way, don't come at me. I meant more like, I think I am one of those cases where I need a little bit of both. I need a lot of time on my own, but I also need some practice with people. Not being dating consistently for so long, I think, has made me, one, less confident about myself because I can look as great as I am, but it's very hard to not feel like it's a you problem when you're constantly not dating, or not feeling like you're as good, or maybe something's missing. But then again, for example, for girls, a lot of them don't date for a long time. That's because all the men are trash. So, try to be try to be humble and keep working on yourself, but also don't be a dick about it to yourself. But also be confident and be humble. Yeah. So I think basically with the guy that I was speaking to, I think this has the thing that I have learned most coming out of this after a long while of kind of feeling this low, because, people will be kind of and you will probably sometimes be like that to yourself, it's been a long time. It's been a while. Get over it. No one wants to hear this anymore. And, from time to time I still sulk about the other guy too. But I think that also is a reminder, these people that I sulk about the most is because there are very good qualities about these people that I really, really enjoyed. And those are things that I should focus on. But one thing that I learned really important from this lesson is, I think if you choose to date the right people and not think so much about whether it'll work out or not, because it's very hard not to kind of, especially with so much instant gratification these days, it has become very difficult, I think, to find someone with good moral grounds and good value, because we're so used to instant gratification that we kind of want results now, everything's now. That means that we forget to take the time to grow with someone, to understand. Think of it like this. If you were with a friend and you were dating, sometimes we approach it very, very differently. But really, we should approach it with maybe a streak of romance, but at least based on the same grounds of understanding, getting to know a person like they were a friend. You wouldn't go up to a friend that you met. For example, imagine if I went up to one of my music friends and just said hey, you're hot, or something like that. It would just make things really awkward. Whereas if I was hey, how was your day? It's really nice to meet you. I've been excited to meet you for a long time. Talk about music, and who's your favorite artist? That would go significantly more somewhere. This is for mostly guys, by the way. Guys are having a very bad time with dating these days, especially straight men. But it's a good reminder for me, because I used to always pigeonhole people a lot, into this is definitely a friend, this is definitely going to be a dating one, and it was 0 or nothing. And I tend to go like that. Maybe it's an ADHD thing, 0 to 100 kind of a mentality, but I've been trying to work on that. But what I'm trying to talk about is, I think being able to date someone good, if you choose someone with a good base value as a person, even if it doesn't work out, it shouldn't matter, because you should be able to still at least have some kind of decent, good, balanced relation with that person. You don't really have to stay as friends. You don't really have to have them in your circle of life, but you should be able to regulate. If you're well regulated, then you should be able to leave that experience with something positive. And that is the thing that I'm working on with this person. I'm still friends with this person. Don't exactly know what it was about myself, but that kind of changed his mind, that he's no longer interested. All I can say, it's probably one of those things where he's physically more attracted to me, not in a bad way, just generally aesthetically think I'm a cute person, blah, blah, likes my personality, but it doesn't vibe in terms of going long-term with a romance side of things. And that's totally okay. I totally get that. There's so many people that I've maybe thought that I'd be think they're off the charts, but when you start talking to them, there's just no spark there, and even that, you have to learn eventually that, there's a honeymoon phase. Don't get too off track with liking someone. You should be consistently liking them, especially in the dark times. I always remind myself, it's kind of say if you use Grindr, for example, take 25% off like the looks of someone because it's probably good lighting and good angles, and it might be slightly outdated most of the times. And same with relationships. Expect your first fight or argument over something important or value to be like your first validation of whether this relationship is actually the right one or not, because how you and that person handle it is how the relationship's going to go. It's going to apply to a lot of things like communication style for people, or how they stand with their values, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and like I said, talking too much, rambling on too much, or using too many words has always been kind of something that I've been less confident about. Funny, because I run a podcast, but hey, that's probably the perfect job for me, right? Because I like to talk. But it does come, I guess what I was saying, like with all those negative things, it was like this whole episode, like this whole period has been like a combination of factors that eventually led me to kind of break down into like a low period where I feel like depression might have come back a little bit, and I was pretty sulky. And I never really felt like I was an amazing friend per se. So oftentimes I feel like because I'm so busy, or I'm so like in my own, this is why I relate to the person that I'm now friends with. We both have episodes where we're like, we enjoy people's company a lot, but we also really enjoy our own time. I believe they call it like omnivert. That's like the loose term for it at the moment. It's not quite like studied as much yet, but there are some people who recharge a lot better alone, but also need to be around people a lot. I'm pretty much that kind of person, and to a degree, I guess. Yeah, and I think like it's about finding the balance. Like, for example, now that I'm well recharged and rested and I've let things settle in, I've had time to think a lot about these things. I think that's why when things feel slightly off, or things become challenging, it's important to take a break and actually properly sit down and think, spend time with yourself and think about things, because you then actually learn from the experiences and you figure out the root problem of, why did I make these choices? Why did I punish myself this way? What am I trying to achieve? Is this going to help by thinking about things this way? Is this going to help by beating myself up? What can I take out of this experience and actually improve on myself? Hard questions to ask yourself. And going back to like romance and relationships, when I was in my early 20s, I had a few like heartaches, but it was really funny because looking back, it's just all very cringe moments over like very small things. I didn't even notice people like as well as I probably should have to be like hurting that much. But they were pretty significant moments, and I think they were good to have. But I think it's good to be in a place in modern society to work on regulating your feelings and expectations about people. Not to say I like to downplay it, but I mean like to have healthy regulations, knowing that when something passes, there will be feelings that you should experience. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel things, especially crying your tears from crying compared to tears when you cut onions. They have very, very different chemical makeups, and sad crying actually helps you regulate those emotions and chemicals in your body, and that's why you always feel that lightness and sense of relief. And every time I read that, I always think it's very interesting, because to be honest, I can't remember the last time I like significantly cried, like when I was in my younger teen days. And I feel like a part of that really is society kind of like as a whole, not just Asian. Like this is often I guess categorized as like an Asian stereotype thing, like families don't, which is true in my family. Like the Asians don't hug as much, don't like, kiss each other or like communicate feelings as well. And it's true, but different cultural ways, like we have different ways of saying I love you. But I think it can be improved on, and there are parts of the tradition I think we should ditch. But I think I think it's important to embrace those feelings a little bit more. And, society as a whole really doesn't like people showing people crying, people documenting that experience. And I think I agree on some level that sometimes when you record yourself crying, it can be a little bit cringe. But then again, you don't really have to like comment something on that. Like people like to comment negative things on things that they don't like. But I think unless it's sort of like a human rights issue, I feel like sometimes you don't really have to like say, just because you have something to say doesn't mean you should say it, right? And if you don't have something nice to say, you shouldn't say it. That's why there's so many reasons why these sayings are always developed, because people can be very nasty sometimes for no reason. And you never know. Think about it. Like your one word could be something that ends it for someone. It might not like seem like much, but it can be the last breaking point for someone. And if you're a person who doesn't think much about that after hearing that and doesn't take it to heart, then I'm sorry to say, then you must be a very horrible person, and you definitely don't deserve a good life. There's just full stop. No leeway with that. If you don't care about somebody else's life, then you really have some issues. And we can't be friends. But yeah, I think like we should definitely have a lot more tolerance, acceptance, and a little bit more crying. A lot of crying that we see and like moments of crying is all just stimulated by like, Hollywood movies, Pixar, and all that stuff, and mainstream pop culture. When was the last time you hard cried over like something that you experienced in person? And when was the last time you let it out in front of a friend that you really trust, and someone that you know that can see you in your ugly parts of life and still accept you? Things like that. It's important to remember that pop culture is very, very one-dimensional, especially movies and stuff. This is why we have so many problems with stereotyping of gay people, disabled people, women. Like women having like plus size like models had to be like a long aged process of fighting just to kind of get people to accept the fact that women can be a little bit more curvy. And guess what? Women were developed to be more curvy, and they get fat easier because they needed a fat reserve in order to actually help protect kids from starving. Like, for men who tell women to lose fat after like giving birth after a year or two, bitch, please. This woman carried a baby for 9 months, which you didn't have to do nothing about. All you probably did was complain. And then they have to make the food for them. Like if they're breastfeeding, they have to come from somewhere. And by the way, their body actually also calibrates the breast milk, if you didn't know, according to the saliva information feedback for the breast and shit like that. So they're not just making food, they're making like a whole immune system. So it's pretty miraculous if how about you shut up and make some food? Take them out somewhere nice and ask them if they're feeling okay after post, maternity. Like shit like that. Or like look after the kid for a while. Save her like from getting up whenever she can. Like stuff like that. This is why I say like most men aren't even ready to be like dating, let alone have kids and have family. And so many people find out how bad, like from videos I see, I'm guessing if they're not fake, so many women have found out how bad their partner is on the wedding day, which is scary if you think about that. Imagine like finding out your husband is a complete different person on the like first night, or like after the first week of living with the person, like they just flip a switch or something. Crazy. And this is another one of my favorite reminders, and I've really taken to heart that one, that opportunities don't just come from good things. A lot of things have been really good lately, especially with the last 2 months growth. And, I forget that the story about the one that I mentioned in one of the episodes about the farmer who saw a bunch of horses come to the farm, just wild horses, and him and his son were like, wow, what great luck. And the son gets on, rides the horse, but then falls off and breaks his leg, and they're like, oh, terrible luck. But then, what seemed bad, then they had the army come to recruit people and looked at the son and noticed he was injured and was like, never mind. And the story is basically serving as a reminder that sometimes a lot of things may seem bad, but there is a bigger picture at the end. And it's important to kind of try to keep staying in the game to see how things flesh out. And so, sometimes, and for example, this channel's whole invention was based on a bad catalyst. And that is why I think it's very, very important to remember that. And How to Blaze podcast, the name itself, I will always remember the moment where I noticed when I bought my first Bluetooth headphone in ages. It's discount on JB Hi-Fi, by the way. I think it was like $69. I remember when I was naming it, I was like, oh, I don't want to call it the full podcast name. So I was just like, because I bought it for like a video idea that I'm going to do this season. But yeah, I bought it because, and anyway, so I was going to put the name in, and then I was like, oh, I'll just do abbreviation. And it turned out How to Blaze podcast, when you put it into abbreviation, it's HAP. It's like HAP, short for happiness in a way. And that just made me giggle and think something. It's just one of those things where you feel like things happen for a reason, and let's talk a bit more about other things that kind of brought me down. And I think because I was struggling a little bit already, and I felt like very sort of a little scattered, I guess, to be honest. And then I had a very fortunate opportunity to be pushed in the algorithm, a gentleman artist called Tom High. And we had a really exceptional interview. It was fun. It was great. He was a really cool guy. And he was very, very early on, like less than 2 months into, less than 2 months into posting music online. And he's already quite successful, quite big. People love his music, and his music is really good. But it isn't me without doing something, which is something I should stop saying, because that probably really doesn't, and as Brezie usually teaches me, stop saying negative things about yourself, because it doesn't make anything better. It might just make things worse. But it isn't me if I don't forget to kind of do something important in an episode somehow. It's not true anymore. I don't actually usually make any mistakes anymore, but this one was really, really annoying. This one was, I forgot to press record at the very start. I knew something was off, and I knew I forgot something, but being a bit flustered up to that moment, and I was actually also feeling a little bit nauseous that day. But just, it was just when I realized that the next day when I was trying to edit and realized I haven't received anything from Zoom, a link from Zoom at all, I was like devastated. And I apologized to him immediately, letting him know that there wouldn't be an episode because I had made such a mistake. Unfortunately, I never heard back from him since then. And I assume it's just because he's busy, because he is a very, very polite gentleman and very, very kind. I can already sense it, but it's just, I don't blame him. I feel like it's a very, very unprofessional mistake to make. And, time is value. He is very, very busy from what he told me. And generally, all artists are. And every opportunity is very, very... You just have to learn, I guess, sometimes an opportunity is an opportunity. If you waste it or if you miss it, then it's gone, just like that. Another thing is, I do tend to validate myself from other people a lot, which is something I'm trying to steer away from a bit more, which I have done better with the channel itself, but I think less so with myself. And I think healthy confidence is accepting compliments without feeling the constant need to feed the ego with the validation. And getting used to that at an early stage really helps. I mean, like, I dealt well with some comments, but I think like one of the comments I recently received when I was already feeling bad about the episodes and stuff, like the archery episode, I got a comment that was saying that, and it was not even the episode itself, it was just a short. So I probably shouldn't have really taken it to heart that much. But the person was just like, oh my God, you dragged this out so much. I've never again in my life watching one of your videos. And I'm like, all right, calm down. It's just like a slow-mo of the archery that was dragged on a slightly, maybe 2 seconds too long. But yeah, I agree it was a slow one, but it was mostly to match the music. And, I did originally attempt a second edit and it was going to remove, but now I was just like, that just seems too like sort of like perfectionism, kind of like, you already posted it. That's not really authentic if I post a second one. So kind of gave up on that. But, a comment is a comment. You can take the constructive criticism and take it with a grain of salt, and then that's it. I mean, this whole channel was like always, it was always criticized a lot at the beginning about the whole thing not working. and it took me a while to be able to sum it down into like a little pitch that I can do and find a motto for it, and things have become so much more consistent. And I have learned to accept that, you can't like everyone and you can't like everything. Yes, I can try to learn about everything, but there will always be one or two subject areas or events that I'll just be like kind of bored, gonna yawn, kind of want to go home. But that's okay. Everyone has their likes and dislikes, and I am a person after all at the very core, and that's just how things work. You can have a respect for it though, either way, and you should have. Like I went to a marketing summit, and it was free, and it was run by very, very impressive people. But I just about 10 minutes in, I knew I was in the wrong event for me. Like I knew that I like to learn, I like to be educated, but maybe not that type of educated. And it was probably the wrong kind of education for the channel, because I went there specifically for the channel's growth. And it's just I don't know, I've always been like a bit more of a unique approach person, and I like to do things a certain way, and I kind of like doing things a little bit different from other people. You can call it attention seeking, it probably is true, but I don't know, I enjoy that little streak of weirdness and freakiness in a way, but it also can sometimes feel like a thing to attack for my own confidence. Everything's a two-way street, I guess, is one way to take it. But if you're listening, and if you're a little weirdo like me, stick with it and just learn to balance things out in a healthy way that you feel good about yourself. And, something that keeps you unique, but also have good connections with people. If you freak so much that nobody is in your life, that might be a problem. Just saying. Let's see what else. Bam, bam, bam. I think also going back to the whole Asian culture thing, because my parents were never very good at like serious talks. I think it was always very contradicting. Like when my parents got divorced, my mom used to be like, you need to connect with your dad more, even though, we pretty much stopped seeing him because he was always away at work and had very little communication or contact with us or presence since, like, I think when I was less than 15. At that point, I was already into my 20s, and that's like a good 10, almost like close to 10 years of no contact. And you expect me to kind of just be like, yeah, my dad, I love you, it's kind of weird. And I was totally okay with it. I never really thought much about it because, we had like sort of my aunt and my mum juggling around, switching around, looking after us. So we always had like a pretty diverse parenthood. And, I had a good childhood, never really struggled with money at the time. And, we had like a easy life, I would say. There's struggles there here and there, but honestly, it's a privileged life. So, like I've never been one where I feel like I need to talk about family struggles as much, but I think in communication, there was always a lot of weird things that happened, a lot of things that contribute to that. For example, we don't really say I love you as much, but we show a lot of care through food. My parents, like mum, like in particular, always try to look after us with like a lot of like different variations of food, and Asian parents in particular, most white families, Western families probably cook a dish or two for like every meal. Asian parents, typically from when I was growing up, that was the thing I missed the most when I moved out. They always cook like have about 6-7 dishes easily every single meal. Can you imagine how difficult that is to maintain? You will realize that very quickly once you're the one cooking. It's a lot of meal prep, a lot of planning, a lot of like storage, a lot of like understanding your pantry, your fridge storage, all that kind of stuff. Really impressed with them, to be honest, about that area. But we often show love through food. That's the way how they show affection. One thing that I often really picked out was when I was not seeing my mom a lot, and when I saw her, obviously I missed her as well. And I'll be trying to talk about something right after my sister shared something, and she'd be like listening intently. And as soon as the moment pivoting to me talking, she would often kind of go, oh, taxi can go this way, or like, oh, this came up, or this came up. I'm just like, not calling it a wanky move, but kind of a wanky move. And I pointed it out at one point very respectfully, and she felt really bad about it, but then continued to do it. So I was just kind of like, well, this isn't going to work. That's not really convincing. If you really do care for me, it should not be that hard to listen to me for a few seconds. Anyway, so little things like that I think have always been challenging in terms of communication for me. Communication was a very, very big thing I had to learn when I started moving out, when I started making my own relations, making my connections with friends. It also meant that when I met my first friend of like 10 years, a very good friend, I would have to, and she wasn't a big hugger, but she did like hugs, especially when she really needed it. It was a very interesting dynamic to kind of juggle and kind of learn to understand. And I'm a big hugger personally, but I don't hug very often, which is a weird thing. And I think like it's also that this is why I relate to Two Broke Girls character Max so much. If you know, that's one of my favorite show, and probably because of Max. There's a part where Caroline starts crying because she sees a shoe in the store, in a budget store where it had been like, an op shop, I guess you could call it, that someone had sold, and it was her shoe, which was originally $500, but now $50. No, $5. And she was like, "Oh my god, it's like me. I've been reduced." And she starts crying, and then Max kind of like walks away quickly and starts looking at a different rack of clothes. And she's like, I was crying. You need to react. And she's like, "Oh yeah, I did. I rolled my eyes uncomfortably." And I'm not that bad, but I do think sometimes when people are having a bad time, I struggle to find I know the right words to say, the basic things to say, but I feel like a person who's very good with their relations or really good with friends will be able to comfort someone in a better way. And I've been wanting to work on that a lot more, like being able to be there for someone in a better way, give them like, maybe make them some food, or maybe like, but I think like sometimes, because it's not like very like, again, going back to pop culture, it's not like someone goes, "I'm so sad right now," and then you kind of have like a very, like sitcom kind of responses. People often ask for help or signify that they're mentally or mentally like down, like they are worn out and things are not good, or maybe they're lost in life. These kind of things are very, very subtle, and people, at least how I found, like not a lot of people are great with talking about their feelings. You'll come to find, especially if you're that kind of person, a lot of your friends might be the same too. And sometimes it's for little moments that you need to be sensitive and more able to pick up on that stuff, but then also know how to respond to that. That really dictates how that kind of unfolds. And I think that's really, really important. There's a few things I've noticed. People have like a friend coming up to me and saying like, I just feel, kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like these kind of sentences. It's really good to know how to like guide those people and coax them out to talk about it even more, rather than just kind of go, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Like, for example, that doesn't really help. Anyway, on to the next point. I think also as a person, I am known to be an empath, and I make the first impression for a lot of people is that I care a lot about people. I'm very sweet or genuine, a bit awkward, but my compliments are more like, I guess, like of its own, but it's genuine and upfront. I guess you could just say like being like a gay person, I definitely do not sit in any of like the stereotypes. I don't fit into like the hunky group of people, the tone built people, the gym people. I definitely don't fall into the really sassy, fun, quirky type either. And, body wise, I'm definitely not one of those either. And I'm not really a twink anymore because I'm old, and, just so many things. So I don't know, it feels like I always have to kind of make like my impression of my own. So I've always kind of went with the whole different to other people kind of vibe, which is totally fine. But I think a lot of that also comes back to when I was in my 20s, I had to eventually, after uni and started my second job, my main job that I did 10 years in for hospitality, I ended up having to kind of move out urgently because, one, I came out all by accident to people. That was me being like stupid. But everyone in the family, we had like a bit of a falling out, and my mum particularly didn't sit well with being gay at first. And in the end, basically our relationship just got very toxic, and I decided to move out. I did some things wrong. They did some things wrong. The only difference was I was willing to apologize. They were not willing to apologize for anything that they did on their part. It was always like really my fault for everything. And that led me to eventually one morning realizing that, I don't know, I think it was a panic attack or whatever it was, but I felt like I could barely breathe, and I felt really, really anxious and really sick, like almost nauseous sick. And it wasn't because I was actually sick. I knew it was a very psychological thing. At the moment I started packing everything up and kind of trying to hide that I was like packing up was where I kind of started feeling relief. So I knew I had to be out of the house, because this house was also very, very, my family was always like, on the surface, everyone was really, really closely connected to each other. But every time someone's back was turned, someone always talked shit about somebody else. And I really didn't enjoy that. And I was just kind of like, why don't you just, if you bitch so much about someone, just tell them you're a bitch and just stop talking to them. I was like, just because you're in family doesn't mean you have to be in a good relation with them. Especially if you're going to end up hating them so much. And there's so much implied sort of like, I have to do this because of the family. I have to do this. And I'm like, that's the worst thing about the old traditions in Asian families. There's always so much resentment after like you're old and you're like, I wasted my life doing this because I had to do this. And I'm like, no, you didn't. Yes, you probably felt like you had to, but if you just be selfish a little bit and do what you actually, want in your life, because it is your life and you have to live through it, then maybe you would feel a bit better about yourself. And my mom, unfortunately, was a typical example. She did sacrifice a lot for us, and I'm very grateful for that. But it is also a choice that she had made, and she has, on the most part, been pretty acceptant of it. So I think she's done really impressive with her life, and considering she had no experience into the business life, and she ended up running the business for the family because she had to, and she was the least ambitious one about money. The only reason she worked so hard was just to kind of give us a better life, and I really, really appreciate that. But I also feel like if she had tried to step out away a little bit earlier and enjoy her life like she is now, she would definitely be able to have a happier life. I don't know, I feel like that resentment leaves a streak in you, and you can always sense it. And being away from your family very quickly makes you realize you get very, very lonely very quickly. You miss that sense of connection, because like I find a lot of times I make these beautiful connections with friends and I love them so much, but you feel like it's almost like, like remember when you're playing Sims, you have like, it's probably not good to use a game simulator, but as an example, but those different like gauges, those different bars, it's like getting a hug from a friend for like, for 5 minutes would be kind of feeling a different bar to getting a 5-minute hug from, I guess, like a partner, a romance kind of side of things, is what I've always felt. I could be wrong. If you feel different, leave a comment down below, and maybe I should work on that a little bit more. But I always feel like there is something different and there's something missing. And I think it stems from maybe the paranoia of like, friends, like when you're the third wheel constantly. Like if you're ever like with someone and they're like your best friend, for example, and then, that sadness when they finally found someone, you're happy for them, but that you'll see them less for sure. Especially if they like kids, then they'll probably have kids. Then you'll see them even less more unless you find a way to incorporate yourself into that life, like really, really vigorously. But even then, you'll probably still find yourself kind of eventually slowly kind of fizzling out a little bit. And that feeling always scares me a lot, because then I feel like, what if when I'm 50 or 60 and then all of my friends partner off and then I'm like the only one on my own, and then, you can only bounce around different people's families for holiday gatherings for so long. And eventually you want your own kind of family gatherings too. And when I moved out, eventually I lost my first dog, which I didn't find out for a while. And, I missed that time. I was really not in a place of mind that I wanted to be back at the family. There were times when my mom like asked me to go back to Taiwan to do some documents, and I still like said no. I was working through it. And when my grandma passed, I also didn't go back. I missed a lot of grief is essentially what I'm talking about. Like, in terms of like my experience with death, a lot of it was either too early on in my life or way later on when I wasn't even present. And I feel like it makes it very strange to feel like grief really changes you. And when you lose someone close to you, it really, really changes you. But not having someone like always present in your life, like being in a very strange level of intimacy level, closeness, and then losing them really makes a weird thing. And that doesn't, as a result, kind of makes me feel like I'm only part way understanding of death as a person. And you get all the right feelings, obviously, and you understand all of the things, but you know that like you haven't experienced it fully, so you know that it's gonna be really scary when it happens. Especially from what I see from people dealing with it, how it will forever stay with you, basically. But yeah, I think that's one thing that's made me a little bit of a different person. But yeah, all of that, I think, those kind of interactions with my family is one of the things. Like, I would say what shaped me as a better person, if whatever communication skills I have right now, they all come from good friends that I've made and people who have been kind to me and been able to have patience with me. So if you're a friend to me right now still, thank you very much. And thank you for being patient with me and giving me chances and making me a better person. And we're almost down to the end. The video is getting a bit long. And I will probably actively try to be a little bit more gentle with myself. Working 16.5 to 20-hour days of screen time, as well as everything else, running around, doing things, going different places, then balancing some of the house chores. It probably isn't the most sustainable. But right now it's kind of like a hustle and grind time, as Rantiga would say. So I guess like it is okay, but everyone's energy levels are different, and mentally it does take a toll. So while I do enjoy it, I should be a little bit more alert about giving myself time to relax, because like in the last 2 weeks, I think I've been having barely any time to even doom scroll for like joy, so like I think like I usually can doom scroll for an hour or two, and that's like my relaxation time where my brain kind of just chills out and stops planning things. But recently it's become like maybe I'll have 10 minutes, would be lucky, which is terrible. But yeah, I think that would be pretty much it. I know there was a lot to digest in this episode. As I said, there's a lot of little things that led up to this moment. And yeah, people make mistakes. People are figuring things out. Sometimes making mistakes is the direction that kind of helps you understand things a little bit better and learn to value things a bit more. And I will be back into it. I have some good episodes planned, and I think I'm finding my balance and finding my way again with these kind of episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, then thank you very much, because that really very much is what this episode is sought out to do, to help with advice, to help make you feel better about yourself. If you're a younger person trying to find your way, try to stay true to yourself. And if something really feels right to you, as a concept or as something that you're building, you will probably get a lot of people to say, you'll find a lot of companies starting out that might be huge now, got turned down multiple times by so many people, to the point where they really probably should have taken it as a sign to give up, but they didn't, because they believed in what they were creating. And that is what got them to the point that they are today. And even then, you might be doing lots of renditions. HeartablazE podcast is a wildly different concept, even as like staying true to what it is. It still has changed quite decently since like the first season. I used to even do this story that I wrote and try to act it out in voices and change the voices. And it was kind of like a slight deviation with like a supernatural sort of theme to my life. And eventually it just kind of got a little bit more challenging, because I had too many characters and I couldn't record all of the voices and make them sound different. And I was still very much cooped up in my apartment at the time, recording, and very worried about people walking by and hearing me recording weird things in my own apartment. Nowadays, I don't really think too much about that anymore. So there's growth there, right there for you. But yeah, look back on your old stuff from time to time. It really reminds you how far you've come, especially when you feel low or feel lost. I think it does sometimes help to reminiscent look back on things, they will actually sometimes act as good pointers or good reminders. Anyway, with that, on a good note, thank you for listening to this episode, and hope you've been having a good week. Look after yourself, and as always, keep up the sunshine and have a great day or night. Bye.